Hey guys, what's good? Welcome back to JDB Selects. Man, I've got a bit of a tear in my eye. Round 27, the last round of the regular season already. Damn, this season has just flown by. It feels like just yesterday that we were starting this whole thing up for the year, and now here we are winding it down and building up into finals. But before we get into my tips and last week's results, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for the 2023 season. Now, I will keep doing videos in the off-season, as well as tips and predictions and breakdowns for all of the finals coming up. But just wanted to say a massive thank you for all of the support over the last 3 to 4 months. You know, we've got 5,000 plus new subscribers, done over 500,000 views on all of the videos. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. This isn't a brag about numbers. This is saying a big thank you and showing you how much your support has helped me grow and helped the channel grow. So thank you so much. I look forward to going bigger and better with you all in 2024. And before we get stuck into my tips for round 27, as always, let's look back at how we did last week. Well, round 26 got off to a rocky start when the Parramatta Eels got up against the Panthers on Thursday night. No one really saw that coming, so hard to be on the right side of it. My vibe tip for the Dogs over the Sea Eagles was not to be. I do personally think, though, that if the Dogs had scored off all of their chances in the first 10 minutes and got their tails up, they may have been able to do it, but full credit to Manly for sticking in there. And then the Sharks, they obviously lost Nico Hines during the weekend, so it was too late to change any tips at that stage. So a bit hard done by there, but I mean, come on, we're running at 70% for the year and a pretty difficult season to tip, in my opinion. So we can't really complain. It's been a great year all round. And speaking of great years all round, Abdullah the Butcherer is still atop the leaderboard. He's actually increased his lead by 1 tip over Jared 68 last week. I took a dip down 1 place with that horrible Bulldogs call, but hey, it is what it is. It's the final round of the season, boys. This is make or break. There's some obviously tricky games this week with the team changes, so good luck to everyone in the tipping comp. Good luck to all the guys in the top 8, top 10, top 20 of the JDB Selects comp. Good luck. You're going to need it. And without any further ado, let's get stuck into my personal tips for round 27. Alright, round 27 gets underway on Thursday night with the first placed Brisbane Broncos taking on the 4th placed Melbourne Storm at Suncorp. Starting first with the Broncos, they are just 1 win away from their first minor premiership in 23 years after taking down the Raiders 29 points to 18. It was an action-packed game and Brisbane started fast and were defensively outmuscling the Raiders, but unforced errors and a 60% completion rate in the first half allowed Canberra back in the contest and headed into the sheds locked at 16 all. It changed in the second half though, with the Broncos having it mainly their own way with a whopping 81% of territory, holding the Raiders tryless, and Reece Walsh having an absolute blinder with Selwyn Cobber, the recipient, bagging another hat-trick. It was a classic Broncos performance and even more impressive considering Reynolds and Carrigan were sidelined. And speaking of Reynolds and Carrigan, they will not line up again this week, as will Reece Walsh, Herbie Farnworth, Selwyn Cobbo, Ezra Mam, Billy Walters, Payne Haas and Kurt Capewell all being rested, which means the Broncos will field a pretty inexperienced side. And as for Melbourne, the Storm came home strong to avenge their loss to the Gold Coast Titans earlier in the season, 37 points to 16. It was a really high quality game from both sides before the brilliance of Hughes, Grant and Munster took control and Melbourne pulled away. I did say last week that the Gold Coast would probably give the Storm a good run for their money, then I also wouldn't be surprised if the Storm poured it on late, and sure enough that's what happened with Melbourne muscling their way through the middle, with Grant providing supreme service out of dummy half. Unfortunately for the Storm, Jerome Hughes left the contest in the 71st minute with a knee injury and will not be available this week, while he will join Nick Meaney, Marion Seve, Xavier Coates, Cameron Munster, Christian Welsh, Nelson Asafa-Solomona, Tui Kamakamika, Tom Eisenhuth, Trentley Arrow and Harry Grant, who will all be on the sidelines, mainly being rested while Grant has a shoulder injury. Pappenhausen has been named to start in fullback, so just like the Broncos, Melbourne will be also fielding a fairly inexperienced side. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Storm have a very dominant record over the Broncos, winning 23 of their last 25 meetings, including the last 13 straight. The Broncos have only ever beaten the Storm once in Brisbane since 2005, with their last win at home coming all the way back in 2009. They did meet earlier this year in Melbourne, with the Storm winning 24 points to 16, but the Broncos did lose Adam Reynolds after just 15 minutes in that game and had 3 players sin-binned. But obviously Reynolds will not be a factor again this week either. Geez, these team changes definitely make it tough to tip, but I am going to take the baby Bronx, the Broncos here by 1 to 12 points. They've got so much more to play for than the Storm. The Storm can't really get anywhere more on the ladder, so I think that those young guns from the Broncos step up and try and secure that minor premiership. So Broncos 1 to 12. Moving now to the first of two Friday fixtures, starting first with the 12th placed Manly Sea Eagles taking on the last placed West Tigers at Four Pines Park in Sydney. Starting first with Manly, the Sea Eagles retained their winning ways against the Bulldogs, coming up victors 42 points to 24. Manly were under the pump early but weathered the storm before possession flipped in their favour and they scored 3 unanswered tries just before the break to take control of the contest and never looked back. Kohler was great at fullback, coming in for Garrick and torched the Dogs with speed, while DCE continued to defy Father Time, scoring 16 points with 1 try, 145 running metres, 8 tackle breaks and a try assist. It was a pretty impressive performance considering the amount of troops Manly are missing, and personally I thought they may have been a bit flat with their finals hopes dashed last week, but they certainly didn't play like a side with nothing to play for. Manly will now be looking to end their season on a high against the Tigers before eventually turning their attention to taking on the Rabbitohs in Las Vegas to kick off the 2024 season. And as for the Tigers, they couldn't continue their winning ways, getting thumped by the Roosters 32 points to 8. West got on the board inside the first 10 minutes, but never really threatened the Chooks line from that point onwards, despite being given plenty of chances. The Tigers once again struggled to contain attackers on their edges and gave away far too many penalties, gifting the Roosters 66% of territory. Despite returning to dummy half, Api Koroisau did a majority of the kicking, which to me is pure madness because if anything, they need to be giving Api a break from all the responsibilities, as that man surely has a near broken back from carrying the team week in and week out. And in terms of injuries or teams list, Alex Twal and Jake Simkin return for their final hit-out of the season, but Stefano Utaekamanu and John Bateman are out. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Sea Eagles have won 6 of the last 7 games against the Tigers. That includes 5 straight. Wests have only ever won 3 games at Four Pines Park in their club's history, but 2 of those have come in their last 4 outings there. Pretty straightforward one for mine. Personally, I think one of the easier games of the week, touch wood, but I do think Manly 13 plus is probably a lock here. I think this game could look very similar to the game against the Dogs, where Kohler, Saab, Olakuatu and DCE just have a field day out on the edges, but the Tigers, they have shown a decent forward pack at times, so they may be able to combat or cause a bit of trouble through the middle, but the Sea Eagles should be far too strong, so Manly 13 plus. And the final game on Friday has the 8th placed South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the 10th placed Sydney Roosters at Accor Stadium in Sydney. Starting first with Souths, the Rabbitohs will be coming off their final bye of the season, but the week prior were embarrassingly poor against the Newcastle Knights, bowling 29 points to 10. It was a must-win game to give Souths momentum going into the bye and put distance between them and the rest of the teams battling for the 8, but unfortunately they dished up a 40% completion rate in the first half and only could manage a 58% at full time. Latrell Mitchell was a non-issue, coming up with some really slow, lazy plays, and he will be a non-issue again this week as he was suspended for a completely unnecessary shot on Tyson Frizzell. It's been such a fall from grace from the Rabbitohs this year after leading the comp in the early stages and looking like the team to beat, but they have a chance this week to silence the critics and sneak their way into the top 8, but will desperately need Cody Walker to stand up and take control. So in terms of teams list, Latrell is obviously out. That means Blake Taaffe comes in. Taaffe has been pretty reliable and pretty solid for the most part, covering Latrell at different stages this year, so that may actually work in the Rabbitohs' favour. Isaac Thompson comes in on the wing for Tane Milne, who drops to the 18th man. Tavita Totola will start the game at prop, with Jai Arrow also dropping to the bench, while Michael Cheekham has been recalled to the back row in place of Jacob Host. And as for the Roosters, they continued their very unlikely charge towards the top 8 with a dominant 32-8 point win over the West Tigers, marking their 4th win on the trot, and would you believe it, their longest streak of the season. Despite the big margin, the Chooks had to overcome plenty of adversity, losing Joey Manu in the 24th minute, Sam Walker spending 15 minutes sidelined with an HIA, and Jared Waerea-Hargreaves being sin-binned. The Roosters' handling was still absolutely abysmal, coming up with 12 errors and conceding 9 penalties, but Joseph Suoli'i, oh boy, he was absolutely outstanding and led the Roosters' charge with over 200 running metres, a perfect 5 out of 5 conversions and 10 tackle breaks. Sam Walker was also great on his return and combined seamlessly with Luke Keary, and with James Tedesco returning to the fray this week after missing last week's game with a concussion, the Roosters will be near full strength for their most important game of the season. And in terms of teams list, yes, Tedesco is back after missing last week, Joey Manu has been named to play despite suffering that hamstring injury against the Tigers. And with JWH out, Fletcher Baker comes in and Angus Crichton joins the bench. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, Souths have won 5 of the last 7 games against the Roosters and have won the last 4 meetings at a core, with the Roosters last beating the Bunnies there in 2018. Oh man, this is a tough one this week. This is literally going to be decided by who can hold onto the ball and complete the most sets. And based on both sides' current form over the last month and a half, it is a coin flip. But I am going to take the Rabbitohs to get it done here. I think they've been blasted in the media, and to be fair, it's gone past their performance on the field, which is totally uncool. So I think they might come out with a bit of venom to shut up their critics this week. I also think the bye could be exactly what they needed. They've been travelling for a while up and down the country, so I do think the Bunnies can get it done at home here. So Bunnies 1-12. Moving now to the first of 3 Saturday fixtures, starting first with the 14th placed Dolphins hosting the 3rd placed NZ Warriors at Suncorp. Starting first with the Dolphins, they suffered their 4th straight loss, getting outclassed by the Cowboys 34 points to 10. The Finns were put to the sword in the first half and were unable to get on the board, looking fatigued and unable to withstand the pressure and speed of the Cowboys. If it wasn't for Jermaine Isako, they would have left Suncorp scoreless, and it's looking like that he will finish the season as the competition's leading points and try scorer, which is just incredible considering how his career was shaping up prior to being given a lifeline from Wayne Bennett, and he's really grabbed that with both hands. And in terms of teams list, Josh Kerr has been suspended, so is out, whereas Jesse Bromwich will return, so that moves Jared Wallace to the bench. And as for the Warriors, they made it 7 on the trot with a scrappy 18-6 point win over the St. George Illawarra Dragons, and in the process secured their first home finals fixture since 2008. The Warriors survived a scare in the opening play of the game and then enjoyed 60% of possession and territory, but could only find their way across the line 3 times, with their attack looking underwhelming for yet another week in a row. The shining light though was their defensive effort, holding the Dragons scoreless for over an hour before conceding just the lone try. Coach Andrew Webster has swung the axe this week with AFB Chance Nickel-Klokstad, Dalen Watene-Zelezniak, Luke Metcalf, Sean Johnson, Tohu Harris and Wade Egan all either being rested or removed with injury. That does mean that some of the young guns get a chance, with Tane Tuapeki, Tamari Martin, Ronald Volkman and Edward Colsey also returning from injury. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, there's only one previous meeting between the two clubs, and that was earlier this year with the Warriors thumping the Dolphins 30 points to 8 back in round 14. However, the Warriors haven't beaten a Brisbane-based side at Suncorp since 2018 and have lost 5 of their last 6 there overall. Yeah, this one's tough too, because I think I have to do it and tip against the Warriors this week for the first time in a long time, which has been a nice change because previous seasons I haven't been able to tip the Warriors confidently at all. But I do think the Dolphins get up at home here, so I'm going to take the Finns 1-12. I think the Warriors just have too many key players out, and the Dolphins will probably go out with a bit of a bang. So Finns 1-12. Moving now to the second game on Saturday, we have the second placed Penrith Panthers taking on the 9th placed North Queensland Cowboys at Bluebet Stadium. Starting first with the Panthers, they were sensationally upset by the Parramatta Eels, 32 points to 18. Penrith were desperately trying to slow down the Eels around the ruck, but couldn't find any success and were killed by offloads, with their inexperienced right edge getting peppered. To make matters worse, Jerome Luai suffered a dislocated shoulder in the 26th minute and is facing 3 to 6 weeks on the sideline, which could really shake things up come the finals, as they have an 84% win rate with him in the side and only a 53% win rate without him. Now, over the last few weeks, I have touched on the Panthers starting to show signs of weakness, and I do know that they have been resting players and yada yada yada, but I do think it is concerning to see the lack of fight in the Panthers when they are put on the back foot. So it's definitely something that they need to address and work on, because they can't always have it all their own way. Now, in terms of teams list, Ivan Cleary has pretty much named a full-strength side with Dylan Edwards, Taruva, Kenny and Sorensen all back on deck. Jack Cogger comes in to replace Jerome Luai, which is probably not what Cowboys fans wanted to hear. And speaking of the Cowboys, they kept their unlikely finals hopes alive with a dominant 34 to 10 point win over the Dolphins. North Queensland had it all their own way in the first half, with Scotty Drink popping up everywhere and starring with 1 try, 4 line break assists and 8 tackle breaks. That's really been the story of the Cowboys season though, with the Cowboys looking undefeatable one week and then a complete basket case the next, but I'm sure that they'll collectively put their best foot forward for this crucial must-win game against the two-time defending premiers. And then in terms of teams list, there are no changes to the Cowboys lineup this week. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Cowboys have beaten the Panthers in their last two encounters. That includes a 27-23 point win this season. However, the Panthers have won 4 of the last 6 overall and 4 straight at Bluebet. I feel like this tip might be sabotaged if the Broncos do get up on Thursday night, but I am going to take the Panthers here 1-12. I'm not sure what they'll do if the Broncos do win and there's nothing to play for. But I've got to back them at this stage based on current teams list. They should be able to get past the Cowboys, but just by 1-12 points. And the final game on Saturday has the 16th placed St. George Illawarra Dragons taking on the 5th placed Newcastle Knights at Netstrata Jubilee Stadium. Starting first with the Dragons, they were unable to get past the Warriors, coming up short 18 points to 6, but gave my boys a good run for their money. The Saints almost recorded one of the fastest tries in NRL history when Zach Lomax crossed the line off the initial kickoff but was ruled to have knocked on. They didn't manage to get on the board until the 60th minute for their lone try, but defended their line for long periods of time and held the Warriors to just 3 tries. For the second week running, Blake Laurie was the only Dragons forward to crack 100 metres, crossing the 200 metre mark with 23 runs, with 70 metres coming post-contact. And in terms of teams list, Jack de Belin returns from suspension this week. And as for Newcastle, the Knights secured a berth in the finals, racking up their 8th straight win with a strong second half performance against the Cronulla Sharks, 32 points to 6. That game had that real finals feel about it, with both sides defending gallantly in the first 40 and both only able to cross the line once. That flipped in the second half with the Knights running riot off the back of another masterclass from Kalen Ponga and their outside backs. Newcastle picked up a head of steam and nothing was going to slow them down in front of a sold-out McDonald Jones Stadium, with their forward pack making easy meters and enjoying nearly 60% of possession. The big news out of that game is obviously that Kalen Ponga will be out this week after receiving a solid shot from Jesse Ramian. That does mean that Lachlan Miller comes in at fullback. Jackson Hastings is still listed amongst the reserves, while Tyson Frizzell, Dane Gagai and Phoenix Crossland are being rested. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Saints have won 5 of the last 7 games against the Knights, and they've also won 5 straight against them at Netstrata Jubilee, with the Knights' last win at the venue coming all the way back in 2009. Geez, another tough one to tip that's been completely affected by teams changes and players being rested, but I'm going to take the Dragons here by 1-12 points. The stats back that up. I think the Dragons looked alright in stages against the Warriors last week if they could just find a way to get some points on the board. And the Knights obviously rely on Ponga and Crossland, to be fair, quite a bit to score points. It could really be either way. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've got no bloody idea, but I am going to take the Dragons 1-12. Moving now to the first of 2 Sunday fixtures, starting first with the 13th placed Gold Coast Titans, taking on the 15th placed Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs at Cbus Super Stadium. Starting first with the Titans, they did what they do almost every week against the Storm, which is hang in the contest for 50 to 60 minutes and then fall away at the end, eventually going down 37 points to 16. I really feel for Titans fans as they've been fairly competitive all year, but lack that killer instinct to finish games off or that high-tier X-factor on attack to snatch the tight games. There's plenty to like about their forward pack and their outside backs, but I do feel that they need to lock down an elite half, but I mean, that's a conversation for another time. The Gold Coast obviously have a big opportunity here to end their season on a high against a team renowned for leaking points. And as for the Bulldogs, they slumped to yet another heavy defeat, this time at the hands of the Manly Sea Eagles, 42 points to 24. Canterbury had plenty of possession in the first 20 minutes, but could only convert one of their chances into points, coming up with soul-crushing errors and missed opportunities. Once possession flipped back in Manly's favour, they killed over and essentially let the Sea Eagles walk all over them. There were glimpses of life in that final sort of 10 minutes, but it's too little too late by that point, right? They needed to show that same desire for the full 80 minutes. Another really disappointing performance from a side clearly low on confidence. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Gold Coast have won 4 straight against the Dogs. However, the Dogs have won the last 2 encounters, including a 2-point win earlier this season. I do like the Titans in this one, so I'm going to take the Gold Coast 1-12. I think the Titans' middles and outside backs could have an absolute field day against the Dogs, so would not be surprised if Titans get up 13+, but I'm going to give the Dogs the same chance they gave them last week, or at least a bit of respect, and just take the Titans 1-12. And with great sadness, we have arrived at the final regular season game for the 2023 season, and that's with the 6th placed Cronulla Sharks taking on the 7th placed Canberra Raiders at PointsBet Stadium for a spot in the finals. Starting first with the Sharks, they were unable to lock in their finals hopes, getting blown away in the second half by the Knights, 32 points to 6. Cronulla looked good defensively in the first half and managed to keep turning the Knights away, but were unable to sustain it for the full 80. It was always going to be tough for the Sharks to score points when Nicho Hynes was ruled out, and they definitely missed his leadership and direction. It's hard to be too critical of their attacking performance without him, but the one thing that they should and can be held accountable for was their handling. I mean, come on, only completing at 66% and missing 61 tackles with 14 errors and 8 penalties. Hynes will be back on deck this week after missing last week's game with a quad injury. That obviously pushes Trindle back to 5'8", and Matty Moylan back to the bench. And as for Canberra, the Raiders' finals hopes hang in the balance after going down to the Broncos 29 points to 18. It was a brutal and physical game with both sides going back and forth in the first half before Canberra eventually succumbed to the physicality and sustained pressure from Brisbane, compounded by Jordan Rapana being sent off in the 63rd minute. They were put under the pump by their own ill discipline, giving away far too many momentum-killing penalties, while Joseph Tarpany was the only Raiders forward to cross the 100-metre mark. This week's game is now a must-win if they are to remain in the top 8, dependent on the results of obviously a few other games, and they will now need to do it without Big Red Corey Horsburgh, who has been suspended or is in the process of fighting a suspension. And more bad news, unfortunately, is Josh Papali'i has been ruled out for the remainder of the season with a bicep injury. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Raiders fans will love these stats. They've won 9 straight against the Sharks, and they've only lost to the Sharks in Sydney once since 2014, which is phenomenal. Ooh, this should be a great game regardless, just for what's at stake for both clubs. But I do like the Sharks here, 1-12. I think with Nicho back, they'll come out firing. They'll be able to score a lot more points, and they won't have to deal with the sustained pressure they did against the Knights. So I do think the Sharks can get it done here, 1-12. Bang, and just like that, we're done for the season. That's right, the last official tipping video of the year. In summary, I'm taking the Broncos 1-12, Sea Eagles 13+, Rabbitohs, Dolphins, Panthers, Dragons 1-12, Titans 13+. Sorry, I think in the video I may have said 1-12, but I actually am taking 13+, and then the Sharks 1-12. Right, that's us. That's us for the season. We're done. 27 rounds, just like that. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. Let me know who you're tipping in the comments below. Let me know how you did with your tipping this year, if I helped, if I made it worse. I really do appreciate all the support, so thank you very much, and don't worry, more content coming soon.